One morning, Mizuki walks to school and notices a stray flyer from their cross-dressing cafe. When she enters the classroom, she finds her classmates looking disappointed because of the prize they received for winning the school festival. It turns out the prize was just notebooks and pencils. Many of them feel bad about putting in so much effort. Shuichi and Izumi then enter the classroom. Mizuki notices that Izumi has been doing a lot better these days. When she takes her seat next to him, he even invites her to come watch him practice later. Mizuki blushes because he has been smiling at her much more lately. Later, Mizuki's friends talk about how amazing the school festival was. Shinji even credits the presence of girls at the festival for making the experience so much better. Some of the boys even managed to get girlfriends right after the festival. Upon hearing that, Shinji and Kyogo march over to Mizuki and Seri, asking them to cross-dress again so their hearts can feel alive once more. Shuichi scolds them for always talking about girls, but they argue that girls simply make them happy, and Shuichi probably feels the same way. Shuichi hesitantly agrees. Mizuki then asks if his leg is doing okay, mentioning how worried she has been ever since he saved her during the school festival. Shuichi insists that he is fine. When Mizuki smiles at him, his heart begins to flutter. Later, when Mizuki returns to her seat, Izumi notices that she looks a little pale. He reaches over to check if she has a fever, but realizes that she doesn't. Mizuki reasons that her stomach is just a little upset, since she is trying to hide the fact that she is dealing with her monthly problems. When she gets the chance, she quietly slips out of the classroom to get help from Hokuto. When she enters his office, she is surprised to see Itsuki lying in a rather odd position. They explain that Hokuto is simply giving Itsuki a setai massage because he twisted his shoulder. Hokuto then teases that Mizuki should probably have Itsuki train her too, since her chest is underdeveloped. Mizuki laughs nervously and says that she can't because she is too clumsy. Itsuki disagrees that Mizuki is as clumsy as she claims. He mentions that he has noticed her reflexes are very good. He explains that karate is more about tempering the heart than relying on physical strength, so the karate club would always welcome her. After Itsuki leaves, Hokuto guesses that Mizuki is actually there to pick up her monthly package from Io. The moment she sees it, she immediately hugs the package, feeling incredibly grateful to Io. Later, Mizuki attends Izumi's practice and feels her heart race every time he makes a jump. She ends up spacing out while watching him, and Izumi immediately notices. When Mizuki compliments his jump, Izumi decides to take a break and sits down beside her. Their peaceful moment is interrupted when Mizuki notices a grasshopper sitting on her shoulder. Not being used to bugs, she immediately grabs Izumi, begging him to get it off her. Izumi finds her reaction endearing and calmly tells her that the grasshopper has already leaped away. He quietly savors the moment by holding her close until Mizuki realizes what she's doing and quickly pulls away. Unknown to the two of them, Shuichi is watching from the other side of the field, fuming over how close Izumi is getting to Mizuki. Later that evening, Shuichi tries to convince himself that there's nothing strange about how close Izumi and Mizuki have become. He looks at a photo of Mizuki wearing her Alice cosplay. He can't help thinking that she looks cute. The thought immediately catches him off guard, and he tells himself that he shouldn't be thinking about his good friend that way. He punches himself to remind himself that Mizuki is a bro. Taiki simply rolls over and mutters that Shuichi somehow managed to go through all the colors. The next day during lunch, Shuichi merely stares at the food in his hands. All of his friends notice that he has been acting strange. Mizuki suggests that they all go watch the soccer club's practice match on Sunday. Kyogo tells her that he and Izumi can't attend because they have a track qualification event that day. Shinji also declines because he is going to an anime event. Mizuki then turns to Taiki, but he says that he is also busy because he will be attending a screening of an unreleased movie. Curious, Mizuki asks about it, and Taiki starts explaining the curse surrounding the film. Not wanting to scare herself, Mizuki quickly stops him before he can continue. On Sunday, Mizuki manages to drag Seri along with her to the soccer match. They notice that there are a lot of girls from the opposing school watching the game. As they watch, both of them notice that Shuichi keeps getting the ball stolen from him. While Shuichi is playing, Mizuki decides to cheer for him out loud. Hearing her voice, Shuichi searches the crowd until he spots Mizuki. He becomes so distracted that he accidentally catches the ball with his hands. By the end of the game, Shuichi feels even worse about how he played. Mizuki tries to cheer him up and offers to buy him a drink. She runs off to the vending machines, leaving him alone with Senri. Once Mizuki is out of earshot, Shuichi finally lets out his frustration. Deciding to clear his head, he leaves Senri sitting on the bench. He doesn't get very far before he's approached by a girl named Komori. A little while later, Mizuki returns with the drinks but notices that Shuichi is missing. Apparently, he wandered off while Senri had dozed off. She soon spots him not too far away and is about to call out to him. However, both she and Senri notice that he is talking to Komori. Curious, Mizuki drags Senri to a nearby spot so they can secretly listen in. They overhear Komori confess that she has liked Shuichi for a long time and wants to start going out with him. Both Mizuki and Senri are shocked by this sudden confession. The next day at school, their friends ask Mizuki if the rumors of Shuichi dating are true. Mizuki wonders where everyone even heard the story. She then overhears Senri gossiping about the confession with their classmates. She walks over and tells Senri not to go around talking about other people's private lives. Shuichi eventually finds out that Senri was the one who spread the rumor and immediately smacks him on the head. Senri complains about Shuichi being violent, but this time even Mizuki sides with Shuichi. Later, while Shuichi is spacing out, his friends become curious about Komari. Mizuki says that she seemed cute and looked like a really nice person. Shuichi's thoughts drift back to Komari's confession. She had told him to take his time in answering her. He finds Komari cute, but his thoughts drift to Mizuki's smile and laugh. Then he looks over at the real Mizuki sitting nearby and feels a blush slowly creep onto his face. Conflicted by his own feelings, Shuichi suddenly runs out of the classroom screaming. Kyogo then asks Izumi if anything happened between him and the female sports reporter. Mizuki is curious, so Kyogo explains that there's a sports reporter who has been chasing after Izumi ever since middle school. She kept trying to get Izumi to talk to her yesterday, and everyone agrees that she's very beautiful. However, Izumi says that he found her annoying and ditched her the moment he got the chance. Mizuki begins to wonder if Izumi and the sports reporter are close. Later, during after-school practice, Kinuko, the sports reporter, pays a visit. Mizuki watches as Kinuko interacts with both Kyogo and Izumi. While Kinuko is busy talking about her job with Kyogo, Mizuki thinks she seems like a very cool person to know. Kinuko then finally notices Mizuki after Izumi introduces her as his roommate. She warmly greets Mizuki, who politely returns the greeting. Kyogo then tells Kinuko that Mizuki is a huge fan of Izumi and even flew all the way from the United States just to become friends with him. Kinuko immediately becomes interested and asks Mizuki if she plays any sports herself. When Mizuki admits that she doesn't, Kinuko concludes that she's just another one of Izumi's groupies. She quickly pulls out her notebook and starts asking Mizuki questions, beginning with what Izumi usually does on his days off. Caught off guard, Mizuki answers that Izumi usually does all of his laundry for the week. Wanting to learn even more, Kinuko continues pressing Mizuki for more personal information about Izumi, even asking about his underwear preferences. Before Mizuki can answer, Izumi gently pulls her away from Kinuko and tells Kinuko not to pester Mizuki so much since those questions are supposed to be directed at him. Kinuko immediately squeals with excitement, thinking that Izumi is finally agreeing to an interview. However, Izumi quickly clarifies that he never agreed to talk to her before heading back to practice, with Kinuko immediately chasing after him. Watching the two, Kyogo tells Mizuki that Kinuko really only has eyes for Izumi. Meanwhile, Mizuki still feels insulted about being called a groupie and becomes determined to prove that she's more than just that kind of fan. Later, Mizuki and Kinuko find themselves watching Izumi practice together. As they're both focused on him, Kinuko asks what first got Mizuki interested in Izumi. Mizuki shares that she's always been passionate about supporting Izumi. She explains that she first saw him featured on local television and was instantly captivated by his performance. After returning to the United States, she imported every article and magazine she could find about him. She even mentions that her favorite coverage comes from Spot. Kinuko smiles before revealing that she actually wrote those articles herself. She hands Mizuki her business card, which reveals that she writes under the pen name KK. Just then, she notices that Izumi is about to make another jump, so she immediately dives onto the ground to get a better angle for a photograph. Watching her, Mizuki can't help feeling a little depressed. Izumi notices the disappointed look on Mizuki's face and walks over to tease her, sensing that it's exactly what she needs to cheer her up. He laughs at her reaction, and the sight completely surprises Kinuko. She quickly snaps a picture of his smiling face before commenting to Kyogo that Izumi and Mizuki seem very close. Kyogo agrees and tells her that Mizuki was actually the one who convinced Izumi to start high jumping again. Hearing that, Kinuko decides to observe the two of them more carefully. That evening, Mizuki looks through the scrapbook she made about Izumi and realizes that almost all of the articles she collected were written by Kinuko. She starts to understand why Kinuko assumed she was just another groupie. Although she tries to convince herself that she's more than that, the realization only makes her feel even more discouraged. Meanwhile, Shuichi continues agonizing over whether he should accept Komari's confession. He tells himself that the answer should be obvious since Komari is a very cute girl. However, no matter how hard he tries, Mizuki always ends up appearing in his thoughts. Determined to settle his feelings once and for all, Shuichi heads over to Mizuki's dorm room. When no one answers the door, he quietly lets himself inside. As he reaches the room, he finds Mizuki asleep at her desk. He gently approaches her, intending to wake her up, but stops when he notices how pretty she looks while sleeping. For a brief moment, he finds himself leaning closer, conflicted as he struggles with the sudden urge to kiss her. Just then, Mizuki softly murmurs Izumi's name in her sleep. The sound instantly snaps Shuichi back to his senses. He rushes out of the room and heads to the outdoor faucets to cool himself down. Afterward, he quietly wonders what he had even been thinking. The following day, Komari comes to visit Shuichi and gives him a batch of homemade cookies. He's genuinely touched to learn that she baked them especially for him, and after taking a bite, he realizes that he really could be happy with someone like her. Curious, Shuichi asks what she likes about him. Komari shyly answers that she likes everything about him. She explains that although Shuichi is already popular at school, she truly fell for him during a practice match about half a year ago. Back then, she saw him helping a small child retrieve a balloon, and the smile he showed at that moment was something she simply couldn't forget. Shuichi then thanks her. One day, Shinji and Kyogo notice that Shuichi seems much happier than usual, and they immediately assume that something good must have happened between him and Komari. Shuichi admits that he ate the homemade cookies she gave him, leaving both Shinji and Kyogo completely shocked. Mizuki becomes curious and asks what kind of girl Komari is. Shuichi says that she's a great person. He even promises to introduce Komari to her. When Mizuki happily agrees to meet her, Shuichi quietly convinces himself that this is the right path for him. Later, Mizuki takes Yujiro out for a walk while feeling genuinely happy for Shuichi. She suddenly hears Kinuko call out to her. Mizuki reminds herself that she should be proud of how much she knows about Izumi instead of feeling intimidated. Kinuko then shares that Izumi has just been appointed the new team captain. Mizuki is shocked because she hadn't even heard about it yet. As they walk toward the practice grounds, Kinuko mentions that she's surprised Izumi decided to make a comeback. Mizuki agrees that she was also surprised when she first arrived at the school and learned that Izumi had quit. However, after getting to know him better, she realized that he still truly loves high jumping. Kinuko smiles and says that Mizuki's feelings must have reached Izumi somehow. She then starts teasing Mizuki, strongly hinting that she already knows about Mizuki's crush on Izumi. Mizuki becomes so embarrassed that she ends up running away. Watching her dash off, Kinuko can't help wondering if she might have crossed a line. Mizuki accidentally bumps into Izumi, who has just finished practice. Izumi tells her that he is heading to the dorm, so Mizuki hands him Yujiro's leash and asks if he can walk Yujiro home for her. Izumi can already tell that Mizuki is hiding something, and he even suspects that it has something to do with Kinuko. Mizuki reasons she needs to use the restroom before quickly running toward the doctor's office. When she enters, she finds Itsuki and Hokuto in another awkward-looking position. Hokuto greets her and asks if she needs something. Mizuki admits that she actually came to speak with Itsuki. She tells him that she wants to become stronger and hopes he can help her gain that strength. Hokuto immediately pokes fun at the dramatic way she asked, but Itsuki accepts her request. He tells Mizuki to come to the dojo tomorrow for a trial period. After Itsuki leaves, Mizuki talks to Hokuto about why she wants to train. Hokuto bluntly tells her that her reason sounds idiotic. Mizuki explains that every time she sees Kinuko, all of her confidence disappears. So she figured that learning karate might help her become more confident. Hokuto says that he believes someone may appreciate her vulnerable side even more. When Mizuki returns to the dorm, Izumi comments on how late she is. Instead of explaining herself, Mizuki congratulates him on becoming team captain and says they should have thrown him a celebration. Izumi blushes slightly and insists that he doesn't need a party. The next day, Mizuki attends karate practice as promised. However, she quickly finds the training much more difficult than she expected. Itsuki asks Mizuki to stay behind for a talk. He tells her that if she continues to blindly push herself, she won't get anywhere. He explains that no matter how much she trains her body, she won't find true strength unless it first comes from within. According to Itsuki, cultivating real strength isn't about building a heart of steel. Instead, he describes a strong heart as something flexible, like a large tree that can withstand a storm. He says that the purpose of her one-week trial is to help her understand that concept through experience. After leaving the dojo, Mizuki finds Izumi waiting outside for her. The two walk back toward the dorm together, and Izumi asks why she is suddenly in the karate club. Mizuki explains that she isn't a member but wants to take lessons. She admits that she doesn't want to lose to Kinuko when it comes to knowing Izumi. Mizuki realizes it probably sounds like a silly reason, but she thought becoming stronger might help her control her emotions better. Izumi immediately agrees that it's a stupid idea. He suddenly stops walking and quietly tells Mizuki that the person he is today is largely because of her. Izumi pinches her nose before telling her they'd better hurry home or they'll miss dinner. On another day, Shuichi goes on a date with Komari. Komari notices a nearby crepe stand and suggests that they get something to eat. As they enjoy their crepes together, Shuichi realizes that he's always wanted to experience dates like this. He glances over at Komari and notices how happy she looks while eating. When Komari catches him looking, she offers him a bite of her crepe. Shuichi accepts the offer, accidentally getting cream on the corner of his mouth. Komari smiles, takes out her handkerchief, and gently wipes it away for him. Shuichi thanks her and feels that this is what happiness is supposed to feel like. Later, they stop by a stall selling accessories. Shuichi notices a floral ring and immediately imagines how nice it would look on Mizuki. At the same time, Komari puts on a ring she likes. When the shopkeeper mentions that it only costs 300 yen, Shuichi tells Komari that she should buy it for herself. The shopkeeper tells Shuichi that he still has a lot to learn. That evening, Shuichi feels guilty for thinking about Mizuki while he was with Komari. As he struggles to sort out his feelings, Heike casually comments that Shuichi's aura has become a complete entanglement of colors. The next day, Izumi is busy with practice while Kinuko watches from a distance. She quietly wonders what made him come back. She knows asking Izumi directly won't get her any answers. Then she remembers that she can probably ask Mizuki. Meanwhile, Mizuki is busy training. She cools off by the outdoor faucets when Hokuto walks over to chat with her. He asks how her quest to become stronger has been going. Mizuki shyly admits that she has decided to deal with things at her own pace. Hokuto commends her decision, saying it's probably the best conclusion she's reached so far. Mizuki then asks if Hokuto has ever played any sports. Hokuto bluntly answers that he never has because he finds it pointless to push one's body to its limits. Just then, Kinuko spots Mizuki and walks over to ask her a few questions. However, she notices that Mizuki is talking to Hokuto. Kinuko instinctively puts as much distance between herself and Hokuto as possible. Confused, Mizuki wonders what Hokuto could have possibly done to Kinuko. Hokuto explains to Mizuki that he and Kinuko attended the same university. Apparently, the two happened to meet during one of Hokuto's particularly bad moods when he went to visit a friend in a club she was in. Even so, he warns Mizuki to be careful of Kinuko and advises her not to become one of Kinuko's targets. The next day during lunch, Mizuki chooses an assortment of sweetbreads for her meal. As Mizuki happily digs in, she notices that Seri isn't eating and invites him to join her. However, Seri refuses, saying that he's on a diet. Mizuki apologizes while Izumi casually wipes the crumbs off her cheeks. Shuichi notices the gesture, but he forces himself not to think about it. However, Taiki quietly tells Shuichi that he's giving off mixed colors again. Annoyed, Shuichi tells Taiki to stop. Although Taiki drops the subject, he points out that Shuichi has been acting strange lately. Soon, everyone else agrees that Shuichi has been acting weird, and even Mizuki asks if he's alright. Shuichi insists that he's perfectly healthy, but Mizuki doesn't believe him. She walks over and tries to check his temperature by pressing her forehead against his. The sudden gesture startles Shuichi, causing him to jump to his feet. When he reaches a quiet corner, he stops to think. He realizes that he might actually be in love with Mizuki. He feels conflicted because of Komari. He repeatedly bumps his head against the wall, trying to stop thinking about Mizuki, but she soon finds him. The moment he looks at her, he can't help thinking that she looks too pretty. Embarrassed all over again, he runs away. Later, Shuichi and Komari spend time together at an arcade, trying out the photo booths. They happily look over the pictures they took, but Shuichi doesn't feel right thinking about Mizuki when Komari has been so sweet to him. Komari is about to tell him something, but notices the conflicted expression on his face. That evening, Taiki calls Shuichi for dinner, but Shuichi refuses to come out of his room. He's overwhelmed with guilt because, even if he's with Komari, his heart continues to long for Mizuki. To make matters worse, his stomach refuses to let him rest. The next day at school, the teacher calls on Shuichi to recite. Mizuki tries to help by telling him what page everyone is on, but Shuichi's mind is elsewhere, and he suddenly runs out of the classroom. Later, while practicing with the karate club, Mizuki notices that she's slowly getting used to the training. Kinuko approaches her in disguise, covers her mouth, and looks around for Hokuto. Once she's sure he isn't nearby, she says she has a few questions. Her first question is why Hokuto is at the school. Right on cue, Hokuto appears behind her and answers that he's the school doctor. Startled, Kinuko immediately runs away. Hokuto then hands Mizuki a photograph, claiming she can use it as a Kinuko repellent. Mizuki looks at it and is immediately baffled by the photo. It's a photo of Hokuto lying down. Annoyed, Mizuki asks what kind of picture it even is. Hokuto bluntly replies that it's a photo of himself and insists that it's effective. Mizuki tells him that nobody needs those kinds of pictures of him. Meanwhile, Kinuko catches her breath. She still can't believe Hokuto is now a doctor, but decides that's only a minor issue because she's determined to find out why Izumi returned to high jumping. On laundry day, Mizuki starts feeling tired while waiting for her clothes and accidentally falls asleep. When she wakes up, she realizes she's leaning on Izumi's shoulder. Izumi explains that she was about to fall off the bench when he arrived. He even teases her by saying that he saw her drooling. As Mizuki gathers her laundry, Izumi asks if she's noticed how strangely Shuichi has been acting lately. Mizuki admits that she has and says she's worried about him. Izumi gives her a look before telling her not to worry too much. He heads back, leaving Mizuki to finish folding her laundry. Shuichi arrives and walks over to Mizuki. As Mizuki tells him that she's been training a lot lately, Shuichi suddenly hugs her from behind. The moment he realizes what he's done, he apologizes and quickly runs away. As Shuichi runs, he realizes that the hug confirmed that he is in love with Mizuki. The next day, Shuichi breaks up with Komari. He tells her that it isn't fair to keep dating her because he has feelings for one of his friends. Komari is hurt but admits that she already suspected there was someone else. Even through her tears, she smiles and thanks Shuichi for the time they spent together and for being honest with her. Meanwhile, Mizuki is jogging around the school when Kinuko spots her. Seeing that Hokuto isn't around, Kinuko approaches and once again asks why Izumi returned to high jumping. Mizuki pretends not to know the answer, silently wondering if she shouldn't have accepted Hokuto's photo after all. She decides to run away instead. Just then, Izumi steps in and tells Kinuko to stop bothering Mizuki. Kinuko jokes that Izumi is acting awfully protective, almost as if Mizuki is his love interest. Izumi neither confirms nor denies it but warns Kinuko not to keep pestering Mizuki about him, or he'll refuse all of her interview requests. However, he does admit that he came back to high jumping to keep Mizuki close. Kinuko is surprised by how honest he's being. As Izumi walks away, he hears Shuichi call out to Mizuki. Mizuki turns around and Shuichi tells her that he just broke up with Komari. He then confesses that he loves Mizuki. Many people nearby, including Izumi, witness the confession. With his feelings finally out in the open, Shuichi feels relieved and silently vows to make Mizuki fall in love with him. One morning, Mizuki has trouble tying her necktie, so Izumi does it for her. On their walk to school, Shuichi runs over to them and throws an arm around Mizuki's shoulders to greet her good morning. Ever since confessing, he's become much more affectionate toward her. Shuichi says that even though he knows Mizuki is a guy, he's serious about wanting to be with her. Once they arrive at school, the class learns that this year's school trip will be to Hokkaido. Mizuki grows confused over why everyone seems so excited about it. After the others explain it to her, she quickly becomes excited about spending the trip with everyone. The boys then remember that Izumi is originally from Sapporo in Hokkaido. Izumi affirms that he is from there but moved here to start middle school. That only makes Mizuki even more excited. Later, while visiting Hokuto, Mizuki learns that he'll also be joining the school trip. Hokuto admits that he's also hoping to meet someone while they're there. Mizuki has a feeling he means a romantic encounter, which Hokuto happily confirms, saying there are plenty of handsome men up north. Curious, Mizuki asks what Hokuto finds attractive in men. Hokuto simply answers that it's something women don't have. Mizuki wonders if that's really the only reason. Hokuto explains that it's just the simplified answer, adding that while many people like him feel that way, he still has his own standards. He then says he has a feeling Mizuki is worried about Shuichi's confession. Mizuki is shocked that he already knows about it. She admits that she's at a loss over what to do because she already has feelings for someone else. Hokuto says he's certain that Shuichi is actually straight and is simply reacting to the feminine side of Mizuki. Feeling relieved, Mizuki decides that acting more manly might solve the problem. However, Hokuto warns her that there's no guarantee it'll work. Back at the door, Mizuki can't seem to focus. When Izumi returns to their room, she tells him that everyone plans to go shopping on Sunday for things they'll need for the school trip. She manages to convince Izumi to come along before happily asking what Hokkaido is like. Izumi hesitates before describing his hometown as a beautiful place covered in deep snow. Excited, Mizuki asks him to point out where his house is on a map. Instead, Izumi simply pats her on the head and promises to tell her another time before leaving to do his laundry. When he comes back later, Mizuki asks if he'd like to watch a movie with her. Already knowing it's a horror movie and that Mizuki is too scared to watch it alone, Izumi agrees. The two watch the movie together on Izumi's bed, but before long, Mizuki starts getting sleepy. Izumi tells her she should go back to her own bed, but Mizuki insists she can stay awake until the movie ends. Instead, she falls asleep on his bed. Izumi looks troubled because Mizuki is sleeping so defenselessly beside him. When the movie ends, he quietly pulls her closer and gently kisses the side of her face. The next day, Mizuki feels bad about falling asleep in Izumi's bed again. Still, she admits that it's very hard to resist sleeping beside him. Just then, several students become excited after spotting a beautiful blonde girl standing by the school gate. The blonde girl turns out to be Julia. Several boys approach her while trying to speak English, but she ignores all of them. Even Minami tries talking with her, only to be brushed aside. When Mizuki finally reaches the gate and realizes who it is, she happily calls out Julia's name. Julia immediately runs over and hugs Mizuki. All the boys are shocked by how close the two are. As they chat, Julia reveals that she's moving to Japan to study. The group heads to a burger restaurant for a chat, and Mizuki introduces Julia to everyone. Julia tries speaking Japanese, but her sentences don't quite make sense. When Mizuki asks how she's studying the language, Julia says she's been learning by watching lots of movies. Julia then asks Mizuki to introduce her to Shuichi and Izumi. Mizuki does, and when Julia learns which one is Izumi, she eagerly shakes his hand and says she's always wanted to meet him. After sitting back down, she quietly whispers to Mizuki that Izumi is even better looking in person. Shinji then asks where Julia will be studying. Mizuki explains that she'll be attending St. Blossom Academy. Shinji and Kyugo are surprised since it's a very prestigious school. Julia checks her phone and says that someone from her host family is nearby. Ryo soon arrives and Julia introduces her as the friend she'd been talking about. The three girls quickly begin chatting, leaving the boys amazed that Mizuki can keep up with them so naturally. Shuichi asks how Mizuki even knows Ryo. Mizuki explains that Ryo is actually Hokuto's younger sister. After Ryo introduces herself, everyone is shocked that someone as adorable as her is related to Hokuto. Back at the dorm, Shuichi struggles to keep his frustration under control. He doesn't like how close Julia is to Mizuki and thinks she's far too touchy. He keeps remembering how Julia even kissed Mizuki on the cheek before saying goodbye, something he wishes he could do himself. He starts wondering what would happen if he tried it, causing him to make strange noises that bother Taiki. Meanwhile, Mizuki enjoys a relaxing bath while thinking about how much prettier Julia has become since the last time they met. After finishing, she comes out to tell Izumi that it's his turn. Instead, she finds him asleep in a chair. She quietly walks over, but Izumi suddenly opens his eyes and notices she's finally done. When Mizuki asks what he was thinking about, Izumi casually says that if she had come any closer, he might have kissed her. The comment instantly leaves Mizuki flustered. Izumi dryly says it was a joke before heading into the bathroom, leaving Mizuki flustered. During the weekend, Mizuki and the boys go shopping for the school trip. Shuichi complains that everyone seems more interested in buying clothes. Kyogo and Shinji immediately tell him it's to impress the local girls. Just then, Mizuki notices Julia and Ria wearing their new school uniforms. She happily compliments both girls, saying they look adorable. Before they can continue talking, Shuichi steps in and shields Mizuki, saying they're busy shopping. Julia gives Shuichi a knowing look before pulling Mizuki back toward her. She proudly declares herself a fashion expert and offers to help everyone pick out clothes, and the girls head off together with Mizuki. As they walk away, Julia looks back at Shuichi and sticks out her tongue, making him fume in frustration. Later, Mizuki explains that she came shopping with the boys to prepare for their school trip. Julia smiles and shares that her school will also be going on a school trip. Suddenly, Shuichi catches up to them and tries to convince Mizuki to buy a matching couple's shirt with him. Julia immediately gets annoyed and quickly drives Mizuki away, claiming there's something she wants to show her. Shuichi stubbornly follows them, so Julia pushes Mizuki toward another section while she stays behind to argue with him. Mizuki then notices Izumi standing nearby. She can tell that he seems bothered by something, so she approaches him in a friendly and casual manner. Julia notices and quickly drives Mizuki away again. Once they're alone, Julia asks why there's still so little progress between Mizuki and Izumi. Mizuki explains that there isn't much more she can do because everyone still believes she's a boy. She also says that when she first flew to Japan, she never intended to fall in love with Izumi. Julia scolds her, saying she already knew from the beginning that Mizuki's admiration would eventually turn into romantic feelings. She tells Mizuki that if Izumi likes her even a little, she should start dating him. They can worry about revealing her real gender later, adding that the current situation is only this complicated because Mizuki took too long to make a move. Just then, they hear Shuichi calling out for Mizuki. Julia points out that Shuichi developing feelings for Mizuki is also the result of her stalling. Eventually, Shuichi catches up to them, and before leaving, Julia reminds Mizuki that in love, being early is important. Later, on the train ride home, Julia keeps trying to block Shuichi. During the commotion, Mizuki nearly loses her balance, but Izumi catches her before she can fall. He then guides her to another side of the train, keeping her close so she won't trip again. When the train suddenly jolts, the two are pushed even closer together. Mizuki becomes overwhelmed by Izumi's scent as Julia's advice echoes in her mind. Meanwhile, Izumi quietly enjoys having Mizuki this close to him. One day after school, the group spots Julia waiting by the school gate. Shuichi immediately accuses her of coming just to see Mizuki. Julia smirks and agrees, adding that it's only natural since she and Mizuki are lovers. As she wraps an arm around Mizuki, Mizuki wonders why Julia would say something like that and quickly drags her away to talk in private. Once they're alone, Mizuki asks what Julia hopes to accomplish by telling everyone they're dating. Julia explains that she wants to see how Izumi really feels by watching his reaction to the news. As for Shuichi, he looks completely lifeless after hearing it and refuses to believe the rumor. Izumi, meanwhile, has a feeling Julia is plotting something but tries not to dwell on it. Later that evening, the rumor about Mizuki dating Julia spreads throughout the dorm, and many of the boys begin congratulating her. Even Minami asks if the rumor is true. Mizuki quickly denies it, insisting that she and Julia are not dating. Hearing that, Minami immediately asks if that means he can pursue Julia instead. Later, Mizuki decides to find out how Izumi really feels. Back in their room, she starts complaining that she and Julia can't even have any privacy because everyone keeps talking about their relationship. Finally, Mizuki asks him how he feels about her having a girlfriend. Izumi bluntly replies that it's none of his business. His answer echoes in Mizuki's mind, making it feel as though she has just been rejected. Still, she tells herself that she shouldn't have expected that kind of response from him. Izumi notices her mood suddenly drop and begins wondering if he answered her question the wrong way. Just then his phone rings. It's his mother calling, so he answers. As Mizuki quietly listens, she's surprised to hear Izumi openly express how much she dislikes his father and how he has no intention of going home. When the call ends, Mizuki asks if it was his family calling. Izumi admits that he doesn't want to go back. Mizuki gently asks if he has problems with his father. Instead of answering, Izumi simply apologizes for letting her overhear the conversation. The next day, as Mizuki prepares to walk Yujiro, Izumi returns from morning practice. Yujiro immediately pounces on him in excitement. Izumi laughs as he struggles to get the energetic dog off him until Mizuki comes over to help. The two playfully tease each other, and from a distance, Julia quietly watches them together. However, Minami notices her and immediately starts making moves on her. He even reaches over to touch her hair. Annoyed, Julia punches him. The commotion finally catches Mizuki's attention. When Mizuki walks over, Julia pulls her aside and hands her a bag of snacks she brought from America. Mizuki instantly recognizes them as one of her favorites and happily thanks her. As the two continue chatting, Minami recovers from the punch. Instead of giving up, he somehow finds Julia even more attractive and swears that he'll win her over someday. Mizuki wants to tell Julia about everything she's recently discovered, but before she can, Julia says she already has an idea of how Izumi feels. She then shows Mizuki her school trip schedule. To Mizuki's surprise, Julia's class will also be going to Hokkaido. The two girls excitedly celebrate after realizing that their trips will overlap. Watching Mizuki's cheerful reaction, Izumi quietly remembers the phone call from his mother and the news that his father's health has been declining. On the day of the school trip, Mizuki's group visits several cultural landmarks around Hokkaido. Mizuki is especially excited and wants to take plenty of photos so she can look back on the trip later. Sari seems to be the only one interested in taking pictures with her in one of the areas. The two ask Taiki if he can take a photo for them. Before taking the picture, however, Taiki reminds them that every photo he takes somehow ends up looking like a ghost photo. The two quickly decide not to let Taiki take the picture after all. Just then, Hokuto walks over and reminds everyone that they have a scheduled lunch at Odora Park. Shinji quietly complains that Hokuto ended up being their chaperone. Overhearing him, Hokuto says he isn't exactly thrilled with the arrangement either. Mizuki notices that Hokuto is dressed in a rather flashy outfit, prompting Shuichi to comment that he doesn't look like a teacher. Because of that remark, Hokuto immediately announces that Shuichi won't be getting any lunch. During lunch, Mizuki happily enjoys the meal filled with local specialties. All the other guys also like the food except Senri, who says he doesn't like eggplant. She soon notices a vendor selling roasted corn and excitedly says she wants to buy one. Izumi agrees to go with her after they have finished eating. Once lunch is over, the rest of the class stays behind to take more photos around the park while Mizuki and Izumi head over to buy their corn. Afterward, everyone gathers for more pictures around the park before taking one final class photo. When it is time to return to the bus, Mizuki plans to ask Izumi if he wants to sit beside her. Before she gets the chance, however, Shuichi quickly invites her to sit next to him instead. On the bus, Shuichi successfully claims the seat beside Mizuki and feels like he's finally making progress. He decides to use the school trip as his chance to get even closer to her. He even starts daydreaming that Mizuki will eventually feel comfortable enough to feed him. Shuichi also thinks Julia won't be around to interfere this time. Just as he is about to start a conversation with Mizuki, he catches a glimpse of Julia through the bus window riding another tour bus. He tries to get a better look, but her bus has already passed by. Later, the class arrives at Hitsujigaka Observation Hill. Mizuki is amazed by the wide open fields and the sheep grazing nearby. For some of the guys, it is the first time seeing the horizon. While looking around, the boys notice several high school girls visiting the area, making Shuichi panic because Julia might be near. He relaxes after overhearing that they are locals, only to panic again when he hears some foreign tourists nearby. He forces himself to calm down, but Taiki can immediately tell from his aura that he is still nervous. Nearby, Hokuto catches Shinji and Kyogo trying to hit on some girls and quickly calls them back to the group. Afterward, Hokuto disappears to meet up with someone. Mizuki catches them but decides to keep it to herself, though she scolds Hokuto in her mind for being a hypocrite. A little later, Mizuki notices Izumi standing a short distance away. She heads over to him, and the two end up admiring the view together. Mizuki points at an interesting structure in the distance, and Izumi explains that it is the city's dome. He quietly says that watching the sunset reminds him of the days when his mother was still alive. Izumi then reveals that the woman who called him a few days earlier was actually his father's second wife. He admits that sunsets always make him want to go home, which he finds strange because there is no one waiting for him there. Without thinking, Mizuki blurts out that she'll always be there waiting for him. She immediately realizes how embarrassing that sounds, but decides that taking it back would only make things worse. She simply cannot bear seeing Izumi look so lonely. Hearing her words, Izumi lets out a small chuckle. He comments that Mizuki always ends up worrying about him. The two quietly look at each other for a moment before Shuichi suddenly appears and immediately starts questioning Izumi about why he was alone with Mizuki. Both of them insist that they were just watching the sunset. Watching from a distance, Hokuto smiles knowingly. On the ride back to the hotel, Shuichi is not happy with the seating arrangement because Mizuki ends up sitting beside Izumi. Before long, she falls asleep on his shoulder. Once they arrive at the hotel, the boys finish dinner and feel that they are lucky with the food so far. They begin talking about how a different school is also staying in the same hotel. A group of girls soon comes out of the bathing area, and Mizuki is delighted to discover that Julia and Ryo are among them. She happily walks over to greet them. However, Shuichi and Senri are not really happy to see Julia there. As Mizuki chats with her two friends, more girls gather around, curious about where the boys are from. Shinji and Kyogo eagerly take the opportunity to introduce themselves. Shuichi, however, immediately marches over and questions why Julia is there, making Mizuki realize she forgot to tell some of them. The other boys watch the interaction from a distance. Julia notices Izumi looking over and gives him a knowing smile, catching him completely off guard. Julia has a hunch that Izumi has already fallen for Mizuki. Later that evening, everyone returns to their hotel room. Mizuki is excited to see the tatami mats and futons laid out across the floor. Shuichi is surprised that it is her first time sleeping on a futon. Mizuki explains that since arriving in Japan, she has only been sleeping in beds, so he quickly claims the spot beside hers. In his mind, he proudly thinks it is another step toward getting closer to Mizuki, already imagining how she will be clinging to him. He is grinning so much that Taiki doesn't even need to read his aura to know exactly what he is thinking. Mizuki then notices that Izumi's futon is on her other side, making her happy that she will be sleeping next to him as well. Meanwhile, Shuichi notices that Izumi's futon is slightly closer to Mizuki's than his own. The boys eventually begin wondering if the hotel is haunted. Their conversation causes Taiki to stare silently into space. Everyone immediately gets nervous, thinking that his reaction might mean he can actually see ghosts. Just then, there is a knock at the door. When Mizuki moves to answer it, they see Julia and Ryo on the other side. They ask Mizuki if it is alright for them to come in because they want to hang out before bed. Mizuki happily agrees, but Shuichi immediately steps in front of the door to block them. Before another argument can start, Shinji and Kyogo simply shove Shuichi out of the way. However, Seri stops the girls instead. He insists that Julia cannot come in because he believes she is trying to steal Minami for herself. He keeps demanding answers from Julia and refuses to listen when Mizuki explains that Minami was actually the one hitting on Julia. Julia suddenly smiles and compliments Seri, saying he's cute and that there are not many pretty boys like him in America. Feeling flattered by the unexpected compliments, Seri immediately changes his mind and lets the girls inside. After everyone settles down, Julia tells them that her class will have a free sightseeing day tomorrow. She invites Mizuki and the boys to meet up with them in Otaru. Apparently, several of the girls are interested in getting to know them better. Mizuki happily accepts Julia's invitation almost immediately, and Shinji and Kyogo are quick to agree as well. The commotion is loud enough to catch Okudo's attention, and he suddenly barges into their room to scold the boys for still being awake when they should already be getting ready for bed. Only then does he realize that Julia and Ryo are there too. When Hokuto asks why Ryo's in the boys' room, she immediately walks over to explain herself. Meanwhile, Julia cannot help staring at Hokuto, quietly thinking that he is exactly her type. Eventually, Julia and Ryo bid farewell to Mizuki and the boys. Once they are out of earshot, Hokuto seriously warns the boys to be careful around Ryo, saying that something terrible could happen if they aren't. A chill immediately runs down most of the boys' spines, and they decide it's the perfect time to head to the baths. Shuichi sees this as the perfect opportunity to bathe with Mizuki, already imagining what she will look like. He eagerly invites her to join them, but Mizuki immediately declines, saying that her stomach isn't feeling well. Later, while most of the boys head to the bath, Mizuki and Seri stay behind in their room. Seri says he is grateful that their room has its own shower. He explains that he doesn't want to bathe with the other guys because he only wants to share that kind of moment with the person he loves. It isn't long before the others return, excitedly talking about how amazing the natural stone bath was. Shuichi then tells Mizuki about their plan to visit Susukino that night. Kyogo claims it's because they want to eat ramen, which immediately catches Mizuki's interest. The others, however, point out that Kyogo's real goal is to meet girls, which he ends up admitting in the end. Taiki decides to stay behind because he doesn't enjoy nightlife. Sari also declines since he wants to get enough sleep for his skin. He asks if Mizuki really wants to go despite saying her stomach hurt earlier. Mizuki quickly insists that she is feeling much better now because she really wants to try the ramen. This makes Izumi decide to go as well. As they arrive at the ramen shop, they find an incredibly long line waiting outside. Since they don't have enough time to wait, Izumi suggests heading back to the hotel instead. Just then, Minami spots them and asks what they are doing there. The group moves to a quieter part of the street where Minami admits that he is actually there to chase after a girl he likes. He also says that, as a third-year student, he doesn't have many classes to worry about. However, he reminds them that, as their RA, he can't ignore the fact that they snuck out of the hotel. Though the guys can't help but think Minami himself is breaking some rules right now, Minami begins escorting the boys back to their hotel. On their way back, they suddenly hear a fight breaking out nearby. Curious, Izumi and Mizuki look back to see. Izumi freezes when he recognizes the attacker as someone he knows. It is his younger brother, Shin. Mizuki notices Izumi's reaction. Back at the hotel, everyone eventually goes to sleep. But Mizuki notices that Izumi is no longer in his futon and wonders where he went. Earlier that evening, after the fight ended, Izumi had called out to Shin. The moment Shin recognized his older brother, his expression hardened before he ran off. Izumi eventually explained to Mizuki that one of the boys involved in the fight was his younger brother. The walk back to the hotel had been quiet after that. Now lying awake in bed, Mizuki can't stop thinking about the two brothers. She wonders what could have happened between them in the past. Unable to fall asleep, she decides to get up and clear her mind. As she walks through the halls, she figures that taking a bath might help her relax. She is convinced that at such a late hour, the baths should be empty. However, when she opens the door to the men's bath, she accidentally walks in on Hokuto and the same man from earlier in an intimate moment. Hokuto notices her and calmly scolds her for not knocking first. Embarrassed, Mizuki quickly leaves and tries to compose herself before entering the next bath instead. When she steps into the outdoor stone bath, she is pleased to find that no one seems to be there. Then she suddenly hears a noise. Panicking, she notices that her towel is on the opposite side of the bath, but before she reaches it, she and Izumi spot each other at the same time. The two freeze in place, not knowing how to act. Mizuki and Izumi stare at each other in disbelief, both trying to understand why the other is in the bath so late at night. After a few awkward moments, they both come to their senses, quickly turn away. Mizuki makes an awkward comment about how the water is murky, and Izumi instinctively corrects her. Without thinking, he turns to face her as he speaks. His eyes linger on her for a moment, and he's caught off guard by how smooth her skin looks. Mizuki notices him staring and immediately grows nervous. Trying to lighten the mood and seem like it's normal, she jokes about how red his face is, wondering if it's the heat from the bath. Unfortunately, she loses her footing and stumbles straight into Izumi's chest. Both of them freeze for a moment as things register in their heads. The moment Mizuki pulls away, Izumi decides he's had enough. Mizuki remains flustered, but she can't help feeling a little giddy over the way Izumi had been looking at her. At the same time, she's thankful that the cloudy water hid most of her body. Meanwhile, Izumi sits in the changing room trying to calm himself down. He's relieved that he managed to hold himself back, but realizes that if something like this happens again, he might not be able to. The next day, Mizuki's class meets up with Julia and Ryo's group. The other girls introduce themselves, much to Shinji and Kyogo's delight. Meanwhile, Shuichi walks over while eating a bag of chips, already annoyed that he'll have to spend the day with Julia. Julia immediately insults him, and the two quickly start arguing. Before long, they're shouting loudly enough to attract the attention of people passing by. Mizuki steps between them and reminds both of them that they're supposed to enjoy the day together. Julia agrees to behave, but immediately demands to know why Minami is with them. The moment Minami realizes Julia is talking about him, he happily walks over. He immediately starts flirting with her, much to Julia's annoyance. She responds by stomping on his foot, making it clear she isn't interested. Julia tells him to go back to the people who actually appreciate him, specifically Senri and the girls who have been fawning over him. Minami confidently says that Julia must just be jealous of them. That comment only makes her even angrier as she tells him there's nothing to be jealous of. Watching from nearby, Ryo quietly asks Mizuki not to tell anyone that she's actually Minami's aunt. Just then, she notices Izumi standing beside her and suddenly remembers what happened in the bath the previous night. She immediately grows nervous, and so does Izumi. They've been avoiding each other's gaze all morning. The group begins exploring Otaru together. Before long, Mizuki spots a stand selling soft-serve ice cream and eagerly encourages everyone to try some. Once everyone has their ice cream, Ryo asks to take a picture of Mizuki. Shinji volunteers to take the photo, but quietly whispers to Mizuki that he wants a copy later because he doesn't want Hokuto finding out. Seeing everyone taking pictures, Shuichi decides this is the perfect chance to ask Mizuki for one together. Just before he can ask, however, Julia excitedly points out a nearby horse-drawn carriage, which grabs Mizuki's attention away from him. Their next stop is the Otaru Glass Museum. Mizuki and Senri are both fascinated by all the beautiful glass displays. Even Taiki helps them by explaining what the glass pieces are for. A wind chime catches Senri's attention, but Taiki casually tells him that wind chimes attract ghosts. Mizuki soon finds a beautiful lamp and considers buying it as a souvenir for her father. Shuichi notices her staring at it, and Mizuki admits she'd love to buy it but finds the price too expensive. Shuichi immediately imagines Mizuki falling for him if he buys it for her, so he confidently asks to see it. The moment he looks at the price tag, however, he quietly agrees that it's expensive and walks away to sulk because he doesn't have that kind of money to spend on Mizuki. Mizuki then spots a small glass owl and decides to buy it. Later, while enjoying the view from a bridge, Julia tells Mizuki to look at their friends. Mizuki notices several girls surrounding Izumi and the others as they take photo after photo. Julia mentions that with how they are bunched together, it almost looks like a photo shoot. Julia reluctantly admits that even Shuichi looks handsome whenever he stays quiet. For some reason, seeing so many girls fawning over Izumi leaves Mizuki feeling uneasy. She quietly walks away from the group. Izumi notices and follows after her. As Mizuki walks, she feels a bit sad that she can't ask Izumi for a photo without looking weird. When he catches up, he asks where she's going. Mizuki replies that she just wanted to look at the sea, and Izumi admits he was concerned because she just suddenly left. Just then, Julia and Ryo snap a picture of the two of them together. Mizuki quietly smiles to herself, happy that she got a picture that she wanted without asking Izumi directly. Later, Julia's group boards their bus and says goodbye to Mizuki and her friends. Minami loudly promises that he'll see Julia again once they're back in Tokyo, earning another annoyed look from her. Just then, several girls see Minami and pull him away so they can take pictures with him. During the commotion, someone accidentally spills a drink on Mizuki. Shuichi quickly tells her to remove her sweater vest and tries to get it over her head. Before Mizuki can react, Izumi quietly pulls it back down and insists that she keep it on. Julia notices the exchange and begins suspecting that Izumi already knows Mizuki is actually a girl. During the ride back, Julia can't stop replaying the scene in her head. Ryo notices her spacing out and assumes she's simply missing Mizuki. Julia decides to joke back so no one would suspect anything. In reality, Julia is trying to figure out why Izumi hasn't exposed Mizuki's secret. Meanwhile, back at the bus stop, Mizuki admits that she already misses Julia. Izumi tells Mizuki that they should head back to the hotel so she can change and dry her vest. Mizuki realizes that Izumi had protected her identity back there. Shuichi says they should return too since everyone is getting hungry. Soon, they all begin walking back together. From behind, Izumi watches Mizuki and notices that she doesn't seem nervous at all. He has a feeling Julia now knows that he's aware Mizuki is really a girl. He wonders what will happen now that she may have figured out his secret. The reason he's continued pretending not to know is because he wants to keep Mizuki close to him. Just then, Mizuki calls out to him and waits for him to catch up. For now, Izumi decides to keep pretending and walks beside her, even telling Mizuki that she needs to be the one to hurry. The next day, the group decides to spend their free time eating as much local food as they can. Sari isn't thrilled with the idea since he doesn't want to spend the entire day eating and gaining weight. Instead, he says he'll go look for Minami. He happily skips away, making it obvious that he isn't hiding his feelings for Minami anymore. Their first stop is a ramen restaurant famous for its massive toppings. Only Taiki and Izumi aren't too impressed with the meal and remind the rest of them that they should eat before it gets cold. After finishing their meal, everyone agrees that it was delicious. Shuichi suggests trying croquettes next. Taiki, however, says he'll be separating from the group. He wants to visit Oren, Buchi, and Shiredo Falls instead. According to him, he wants to train there and gather some materials. His explanation leaves everyone a little uneasy, so they decide not to ask any further questions. Just then, Izumi suddenly notices something and takes off running. Mizuki follows his gaze, immediately understands what caught his attention, and runs after him without an explanation. Ahead of them, Shin looks ready to pick another fight. Before he can provoke the other man any further, Izumi steps in and tells his younger brother to calm down. Shin is surprised to see Izumi, who bows to the man and asks him to forgive Shin, explaining that he is still just a kid. Once the man leaves, Izumi tells Shin to come with him. Shin gets annoyed and tells Izumi to stop acting like his older brother all of a sudden. Izumi decides to confront the issue, saying that Shin must be causing their mother a lot of grief if he keeps getting into trouble. Shin raises his voice, saying that Izumi has no right to lecture him when he was the one who suddenly left home. Mizuki arrives just in time to hear the argument and scolds Shin for speaking to Izumi so rudely. Shin asks who she even is, and Mizuki explains that she is Izumi's classmate. She tells Shin that Izumi is only showing concern for him. However, Shin dismisses her as an outsider, saying she knows nothing about their family situation. After throwing one last taunt at Izumi, Shin walks off with his friend. Annoyed by his attitude, Mizuki tells Izumi to just ignore him, though she feels conflicted about getting mad because Shin shares a similar face to Izumi. However, Izumi still looks troubled and suddenly asks Mizuki to come somewhere with him. Izumi brings her to a scenic viewpoint overlooking the city, leaving Mizuki amazed by the view. He begins talking about his father, explaining that he used to be a high jumper and was the one who taught both him and Shin how to jump. When they were younger, practicing together was fun. Every time Izumi cleared a jump, he would excitedly tell his father, who would always praise him. But everything changed after his mother passed away. She passed away because of a car accident while Izumi's father was driving. Overcome with guilt, his father quit high jumping despite still being in his prime. Then his coaching style toward Izumi and Shin changed completely. Instead of enjoying the sport, everything became about breaking records. Izumi eventually stopped loving high jumping and began rebelling against his father. At the same time, part of him blamed his father for his mother's death, straining their relationship even further. Mizuki pretends to sneeze and cough to hide the tears welling up in her eyes. Moved by her reaction, Izumi steps closer and drapes his cardigan over her shoulders, admitting that Mizuki is the first person he has ever shared this story with. Just then, Shuichi calls Mizuki's phone. When she answers, he urges them to hurry back before they miss check-in. So Mizuki promises to head there now while Izumi begins walking ahead. On the tram ride back, Mizuki can't help but think that Izumi still has a lot of unfinished business in Hokkaido. Even so, she feels happy because she believes this trip brought them closer together. The next day, during their flight home, Mizuki and Shuichi talk about how much fun they had in Hokkaido. Shuichi wonders if the trip was boring for Izumi since he used to live there. Izumi disagrees, saying that a lot happened during the trip. Mizuki wonders if he is referring to the moments they shared together. Privately, Izumi thinks those memories are mostly good ones. As the two of them accidentally brush their hands, Mizuki immediately blushes and pulls away. Shuichi notices the exchange and feels a pang of jealousy, convinced that something happened between them. Taiki casually narrates the colors of Shuichi's aura and feelings, earning another scolding from him. Hyogo then asks Taiki how his solo trip went. Taiki says the presents he originally wanted to see never appeared, but something else ended up following him instead. Seeing the frightened looks on everyone's faces, he quickly reassures them that the presence means no harm. Meanwhile, Seri tearfully complains that he spent his last day wandering around Sapporo because he had no idea Minami had followed Julia all the way to Hakodate. From the back of the plane, Hokuto yells at everyone for being too noisy. Mizuki smiles before gazing out the window. She thinks a lot really did happen during her trip to Hokkaido. A moment later, she feels Izumi lean against her shoulder. Looking over, she realizes he had quietly fallen asleep. One day, Julia can't stop thinking about the possibility that Izumi knows Mizuki is actually a girl. When Mizuki arrives at the cafe, the two first talk about their school trip and how Julia enjoyed sampling seafood. The conversation then reminds Julia that Minami had followed her to the next destination, which annoyed her. Julia then asks if there has been any progress between Mizuki and Izumi. When Mizuki avoids the question out of nervousness, Julia asks what she would do if Izumi somehow found out that she was a girl. Mizuki laughs it off because she thinks it's impossible since she's been careful. However, Julia points out that they live together, so Izumi has plenty of opportunities to discover the truth if Mizuki somehow slips up. Mizuki's mood immediately drops after hearing that because she realizes Julia makes a lot of sense. Realizing that Mizuki is overthinking, Julia quickly reassures her that she was only joking. Back at the dorm, Mizuki ends up talking to Yujiro about her worries that Izumi might find out about her secret and what he would do with the information. Izumi finds her there and finds her odd. So to hide what she was worried about, she claims she was just playing with Yujiro. Izumi decides to play with Yujiro as well, so Mizuki allows her mind to return to Julia's concerns. Noticing that she's distracted, Izumi playfully ruffles her hair and tells her to pay attention. When he gets up to leave, he remarks that the messy hairstyle actually suits her. Although she acts annoyed and complains, the lighthearted exchange helps put her at ease. The next day, Hokuto receives a confession from a student, but he firmly turns him down, causing the student to run off in tears. Mizuki teases him about it, and Hokuto explains that he has no interest in minors. He adds that people who immediately give up after being rejected probably weren't that serious to begin with. He also suspects the student is simply confused about his feelings since he is still young. Putting the matter aside, Hokuto asks Mizuki why she came to see him. She hands him a souvenir, which Hokuto finds pointless. Mizuki explains that it's to make up for the day he missed during the school trip after being told he looked too flashy and was told to stay back. He decides to accept it and proceeds to ask how things are going with Izumi. When he notices Mizuki getting flustered, he decides to tease her a little. Still, he doubts much has happened between them. Later, after practice, Izumi notices Julia waiting for him. Once they're somewhere more private, Julia tries to ask him if he is aware that Mizuki is a girl, though her Japanese sounds weird. Seeing an opportunity to hide the truth, Izumi pretends not to understand her since her accent and grammar are wrong. His fake confusion works and Julia thinks that her question came out wrong due to the language barrier. Meanwhile, Shuichi happens to be nearby and actually hears Julia's voice. Already annoyed that she's at their school, he tries to look for her. He spots her having a conversation with Izumi and immediately marches over to pick a fight with her. When she spots him, she decides he is not worth dealing with, so Julia gives up and leaves for the day. Back at the dorm parent asks Mizuki to watch the reception desk while he runs an errand, giving her some food as thanks. While she's relaxing behind the desk, a phone call comes in. When Mizuki answers, she learns it's Izumi's stepmother. She introduces herself as Izumi's roommate, and his stepmother thanks her for being such a good friend to him, before asking if Izumi is around. She explains that she wants to talk to him about Shin, and is surprised to learn that Mizuki already knows who Shin is. Just then, Izumi returns, so Mizuki hands him the phone, saying his stepmother is calling. After the call, Izumi finds Mizuki sitting beside Yujiro. She explains she didn't want to eavesdrop on a family matter. Izumi tells her that his stepmother called the dorm because his phone was left uncharged. He explains that Shin recently got into another fight with their father. He says that whenever something happens between Shin and their father, it somehow ends up involving him too. He has a feeling their recent trip to Hokkaido may have triggered it, though his stepmother told him not to worry. He mentions how kind his stepmother is for saying so. As Mizuki quietly thinks about Shin and the entire situation, Izumi suddenly steals one of her meat buns and begins eating it. She complains a little, but her thoughts quickly return to worrying about Izumi's strained relationship with Shin. The next day, Shuichi finds Julia waiting outside the school again and immediately starts trying to shoo her off by mentioning that Mizuki is no longer around for her to bother. Julia gets annoyed by his words but tells him that she's actually here to speak to Izumi. Shuichi gets the wrong idea and immediately assumes she has feelings for both Mizuki and Izumi now. Julia hurriedly denies it. When Shuichi keeps pressing her for answers, she refuses to explain, only saying that her concerns are about Mizuki and that she doesn't want Shuichi to stick his nose in their business. He hands her his meat buns and tells her to take it easy for today. Julia watches him leave, surprised by the unexpected kindness. Meanwhile, Izumi is out on his routine jog, but his thoughts keep returning to Shin. Back in their room, Mizuki is also troubled by everything that has happened because she wants to cheer Izumi up. When Izumi returns from his run, she comments on how admirable he is for keeping up with his training despite practice getting postponed. Izumi begins unloading his stuff so he can rest when Mizuki suddenly opens up about how she and Shizuki used to fight often. She admits that despite their large age gap, she always found herself getting into arguments with Shizuki. Despite that, she tells Izumi that she never hesitated to speak her mind during those spats because she always knew Shizuki loved her and would eventually forgive her over time. She tells Izumi that she thinks Shin probably feels the same way. As she starts apologizing for interfering in his family matters, Izumi quietly steps closer and thanks her. He decides he needs to talk to Julia. The next day, Izumi waits for Julia at her school gate and it attracts a big crowd. When she notices him, he leads her somewhere more private. There, he finally admits that he has known that Mizuki is actually a girl for some time. Izumi tells Julia that he actually discovered Mizuki's secret shortly after she transferred into the school. Julia tries to understand why Izumi hadn't told the school about it. Instead of answering her question, he wants to know why Julia wants to know about his knowledge in the first place. Julia answers that she wanted to see his sense of chivalry. She marches up to him and begins listing everything Mizuki had to go through just to enroll in the same school as him. She talks about how worried she has always been because of Mizuki's gung-ho personality. She complains about all the reckless decisions Mizuki has made and how she constantly throws herself into difficult situations without thinking. Eventually, it turns into a frustrating rant over Mizuki. After finally calming down, Julia tells Izumi that she was hoping he could become her ally in protecting Mizuki. She explains that Mizuki admired Izumi long before they ever met. At first, Julia thought Mizuki's obsession was strange, especially when she talked about becoming friends with Izumi one day. She never imagined Mizuki would actually enroll in Izumi's school and even disguise herself as a boy just to make it happen. As Julia continues rambling and repeating herself, Izumi quietly starts walking away. Julia realizes this and puts her foot down to quickly stop him. She demands that he answer her question first before he even thinks about leaving. After thinking for a moment, Izumi finally admits that he wants Mizuki to stay because she would have to leave if people found out. He says he kept her secret because he loves her and wants her to remain by his side. With that, he decides there is nothing more to say and walks back toward the dorm. Julia stands there in stunned silence. A moment later, she becomes giddy after realizing Izumi had openly admitted that he loves Mizuki. When Izumi returns to the dorm, he thinks how out of character he just was when he confessed his feelings about Mizuki. He then finds Mizuki there with Yujiro. Mizuki admits that they had just finished a walk, so she wants to groom his fur now. He decides to join her, helping brush Yujiro's fur. Once they're finished, Izumi mentions that his stepmother had also shared something else. She told him that Shin had run away from home and still hadn't returned. Mizuki immediately looks worried. Izumi reassures her that Shin can take care of himself, so there isn't much to worry about. If anything, he feels that he's partly responsible for the way Shin turned out. He admits that he did something similar when he was in middle school. He remembered he had a bad argument with their father. After that, he ran away to Tokyo and stayed with his late mother's family until he entered high school. Looking back on it now, he thinks Shin probably felt abandoned when he left because they used to be so close. Mizuki quickly tells him that doesn't mean everything is his fault. Realizing she's stepping into another family matter, she immediately apologizes, but her stomach suddenly growls. Izumi can't help laughing with how loud her stomach complained. He stands up and suggests they finally eat dinner together at the dorm, admitting that worrying all day made him hungry too. Mizuki catches what he said and looks at him in wonder, but Izumi refuses to respond to the inquiry and begins heading inside. The next day, Julia remains distracted as she keeps thinking about Izumi's confession. She doesn't see where she is going, so she accidentally bumps into Hokuto, whom she remembers as Ryo's older brother. He immediately recognizes Julia as Mizuki's friend and casually comments that Julia's hairstyle makes her look like a heroine from a shoujo manga. He then wonders out loud if Mizuki used to wear her hair the same way before coming to Japan. Julia freezes in shock as Hokuto casually rambles about doing Ryo's hair when she was younger. When she finally reacts, Hokuto bluntly tells her that he already knows Mizuki's secret. He admits that he found out on his own and Mizuki didn't really admit it to anyone. That revelation makes Julia wonder just how many people already know. Hokuto warns her that if Mizuki's secret is ever exposed, everything will be over. Since it's an all-boys school, Mizuki would have no choice but to leave. Even if her actions are out of love, it's not something the school can overlook. Still, Hokuto believes Mizuki already understands that risk and has accepted that possibility from the very beginning. He also suspects Julia already knows that herself. His words stay with Julia as she begins walking. After school, the boys finish their exams, with several already complaining about how badly they did. Shuichi notices Mizuki doesn't look very confident either. He tells her she probably did much better than she thinks, given that her grades are already pretty good. To cheer her up, he reminds her that it's already lunchtime. Later, Mizuki leaves the cafeteria with Shinji. Both are a little disappointed that they couldn't buy a proper meal, but Mizuki is a little relieved that she got her favorite sweetbread. As she heads back toward the classroom, she spots someone standing near the school gate. Looking closer, she realizes it might be Shin. She hurriedly hands her food to Shinji and runs toward the gate. The moment Shin notices her, he immediately starts running away from her. Mizuki chases after him, calling for him to stop. When he taunts her and refuses, she gets irritated. She finally manages to get in front of him and even tackles him to the ground to finally get him to listen. As Shin complains, Mizuki scolds him for refusing to listen in the first place. She asks if he came to the school because he wanted to see Izumi. Too embarrassed to admit it, Shin throws a clump of grass at her before slipping free from her grasp and running away once again. After seeing Shin, Mizuki tells Izumi, who later manages to contact his stepmother. He learns that Shin already informed her he would be coming home and that he was just around the area and wanted to see Izumi's school. However, Mizuki is convinced Shin came to the school hoping to see Izumi. She explains that younger siblings naturally look up to their older brothers, just like she admires her own. Izumi teases her, saying she enjoys being babied. He points out that everyone around her seems compelled to take care of her. She doesn't seem too happy at being called a baby, so he adds that she's lucky to be surrounded by caring family and friends, because to him, even having one genuine friend is already a blessing. Mizuki notices he mentioned Julia, so she casually asks if he has met her recently. Izumi denies it, though for some reason, lying about it makes him feel like an unfaithful husband. At the dorm dining hall, Mizuki notices Shuichi when he comes in covered in bruises and looking exhausted. After getting his food, he explains that the regular team members will be chosen soon, so everyone has been pushing themselves during practice. Shuichi admits he can't afford to slack off since the sports program is what got him into the school. Shinji, Kyogo, and even Seri tease him for sounding unusually passionate, leaving him flustered. To cheer him up, Mizuki offers to bring him food at practice the next day, which immediately perks him up. She then asks Izumi what he'd like, and after he requests croquettes, she happily agrees to buy some for the both of them. The next day, after buying the croquettes, Mizuki spots Julia just ahead of her. Although Julia seems distracted, Mizuki doesn't seem to notice and invites her to watch Shuichi's practice, thinking it's a great opportunity for Julia to see him at his best. Despite hesitating, Julia lets herself be dragged to the field by Mizuki. There they watch Shuichi completely focused on practice, so much so that even Julia is surprised by how determined he looks. However, when Mizuki calls out to him, his seriousness is broken and he happily runs over to chat with Mizuki. Trying to be friendlier, Julia comments that competing for a regular spot must be tough for him. Shuichi simply replies that nothing is too hard when it's for something you love, a response that surprises her. Shuichi is soon called back, so Mizuki hands him the food she brought. He's so happy that he trips while running back to his teammates, yet never loses his grin despite being on the ground. Watching him, Julia remarks that Shuichi looks like he's genuinely enjoying himself, just as Mizuki has been enjoying her life in Japan. Then Julia quietly reveals that she'll be returning to America. She explains that she only intended to stay briefly because she wanted to make sure Mizuki was doing well. Now that she's seen how many people genuinely care about her, she feels comfortable leaving. She tells Mizuki she's happy Mizuki found such wonderful people who care about her. Mizuki feels sad at the news, but realizes that Izumi recently told her something similar. Julia is surprised, but secretly relieved to hear that. Later, Mizuki visits Izumi during his practice to hand him his food. Izumi immediately notices she seems down. She admits she's sad that Julia will be leaving, though she brightens while mentioning Julia repeated something Izumi had once told her. Understanding how lonely she feels, Izumi gently pats her head in an attempt to comfort her. The next morning, the trio spot Julia just ahead of them, already with her luggage. She mentions wanting to say goodbye before leaving. Mizuki rushes over to hug her, and the two wish each other well. Julia tells Mizuki not to rush with Izumi anymore, saying that she learned that Izumi is actually very shy. She gives Izumi a teasing glance, which slightly makes him nervous. She then thanks both boys by their names. Shuichi can't believe Julia is actually thanking him, and the two immediately fall into their usual bickering. Standing beside Izumi, Mizuki watches the pair continue arguing until Julia and Shuichi sound like they are making animal sounds at each other. A few days later, Mizuki calls Julia, admitting she already misses having her around. However, the two have to end the call since it's almost time for Mizuki's classes. On her way to school afterwards, she notices a crowd of girls gathered outside the entrance, which she finds odd. She ends up having to push past them to enter. Inside the classroom, several classmates are staring at their phones. When she asks what's happening, Sari shows her a social media post featuring the photo the girls took during the Hokkaido trip of their friends. Mizuki accidentally taps the like button while admiring how well everyone turned out, especially Izumi. Sari grumbles that all the girls are obviously interested in Minami and complains that they are too confident when you will not hand over Minami to them. However, Mizuki quietly finds herself thinking about how handsome Izumi looks in the picture. Soon, Izumi and Shuichi arrive looking completely worn out. Shuichi complains that they barely made it through the crowd of girls outside and is mad at Kyogo for just watching when they really needed his help. Looking at Izumi again, Mizuki can't help understanding why the girls were so captivated as she takes in his features. When Izumi smiles at her, she feels her heart skip a beat. At lunch, while waiting in line, some schoolmates continue teasing Shuichi since they want him to introduce them to girls. The group soon spot Minami approaching them, making Seri feel excited. Seri proudly shows Minami that he saved the viral photo but cropped everyone except for Minami. After thanking him awkwardly, Minami tells Izumi and Shuichi to be kinder to the girls before showing them his phone, now flooded with messages from admirers he met that morning. Shuichi wonders if he's already forgotten about Julia. At the mention of Julia, Minami acts dramatically because she had left without his knowledge but swears to wait for her. Everyone immediately realizes he's completely heartbroken. Just then, Mazo makes a grand entrance, greeting everyone in German, shocking everyone by his over-the-top entrance. After dramatically explaining himself in German, Minami gets annoyed and tells Maso to just speak in Japanese. Maso gives in, then complains that he also uploaded a great photo of himself at the same time, yet he isn't getting the same attention he is getting. Minami ignores him, while everyone else watches the exchange. Nearby, Noboru, a temporary teacher, silently observes the group with judgmental eyes. Later, Shuichi mentions that he caught Noboru staring at them. The others explain to Mizuki that nobody really likes him because he's too uptight. To prove their point, they watch him scold a student for not wearing a tie. After class, Mizuki manages to push past the girls to exit the gate. She's distracted out of worry from her friends that she accidentally bumps into a photographer named Akiha. She notices that Akiha is very tall and good-looking, not aware that Akiha is looking at her. Akiha becomes fascinated by Mizuki's profile and studies her features. However, he gets far too close, prompting Mizuki to angrily tell him to back off. Rather than getting offended, Akiha says he likes the fire in her eyes before deciding to leave her alone, but promises to see her again someday. Soon after, Ryo approaches Mizuki and promptly apologizes to her. She explains that one of her classmates was the one who uploaded the photo of Izumi and the others. She says the post has already been deleted since she convinced her friend to take it down, but she'd still like to apologize to everyone involved. Mizuki promises to pass the message along so Ryo does not need to trouble herself. Back at the door, Mizuki greets Izumi only for him to collapse onto his bed. Worried, she places a hand on his forehead to check for a fever. Izumi complains that he's simply hungry, but keeps her cool hand against his forehead because it feels nice. Watching over him, Mizuki finds herself wishing she could stay by his side forever, feeling conflicted because she really wants to confess her feelings. The next morning, Mizuki joins Izumi and Shuichi as they search for a way into school without getting mobbed by girls. Minami arrives and says the back entrance is just as crowded. He suggests waiting somewhere else till the crowd dies down when it's closer to their class time, but before they can leave, Akiha approaches them. Akiha notices her uneasiness, so he simply hands over his business card, revealing he's a professional photographer interested in shooting them. Since they can't enter school anyway, the group agrees to hear him out, and he treats them to breakfast at a cafe as a thanks for allowing him to talk to them. Everyone is stunned when Akiha orders an incredibly sweet meal. He explains that he saw their photo online and was inspired to use them as models for a certain brand project. Minami questions why a photographer himself would scout talent, but Akiha says he only accepts jobs where he gets to choose his own models, so his agency really has no choice but to let him look. The group is left speechless again when Akiha pours an absurd amount of syrup over his already sweet waffles. He tells them to think it over since he doesn't need an answer immediately. That evening, Mizuki looks Akiha up online and discovers he's a legitimate professional photographer who's well known due to the multiple awards he has received. Even so, Izumi says he has no interest in modeling and had intended to decline the offer from the very start. Mizuki can't help thinking it's a waste of his good looks. Izumi gets embarrassed and just tells her to take a shower and head to bed because he no longer wants to talk about it. The following day, Shuichi also reveals that he'll be turning down the offer because he wants to focus entirely on soccer. However, the group gives him an uneasy look. Suddenly, the PA system calls Izumi and Shuichi from their class and Minami from the higher class to the counseling room. Curious, Mizuki decides to quietly listen from outside. Inside, Noboru reprimands them for all the girls causing disruptions around campus. He even complains that some had tried to sneak into the school. He then grabs Shuichi's bangs and criticizes his flashy hair color. Izumi immediately objects, saying Shuichi's hair has nothing to do with the situation. Mizuki can hear Minami backing Izumi up, pointing out that Shuichi's hairstyle doesn't violate any school rules. He even promises that he'll personally deal with the girls. Since she is deeply bothered by how Noboru scolded her friends, she decides to rant about him to Hokuto as she helps out in the infirmary. While listening to her ramble, he catches her mentioning meeting Akiha, which causes him to drop a file as panic rises. Hokuto suddenly grabs her shoulders and seriously tells her never to mention his name in front of Akiha, making Mizuki wonder about their history with each other. Unable to shake off her frustration, Mizuki heads to karate practice to clear her mind and she is welcomed by Makoto. Itsuki notices her mood and reminds her not to let anger affect her training, warning that she'll only end up hurting herself. He reminds her she should use this session to focus on growth on how to better handle the situation, and Mizuki agrees. However, as she goes through her movements, Mizuki can't completely let go of her frustration. Unbeknownst to her, Akiha is walking nearby and stalked to watch her from outside the dojo since he wanted to look for his future models. As he observes her movements, he becomes convinced that Mizuki would make an excellent subject. Even when she slips up during practice, he simply smiles. While walking around the school, Akiha hears Mizuki's voice along with another voice that he finds familiar. In the clinic, Hokuto takes care of her injured hand and deems Mizuki to be alright, but scolds her for hurting herself out of anger. He is surprised when he suddenly feels Akiha hug him from behind. Akiha is pleased to see him at Osaka High and begins complaining that Hokuto never told him where he went after high school. Eventually, Hokuto gets annoyed and tries to free himself from Akiha as Mizuki observes them. He tells her that Akiha was actually his underclassman when he studied at the school. When Akiha recovers from the hit, he confirms that he really was an alumnus of Osaka High. Akiha suddenly remembers his reason for visiting and hands Mizuki an invitation. He tells her that it is an invitation to his exhibit and that he wants to photograph her as well. Even if Mizuki is unsure that she would make a good model, Akiha insists that she should at least take a look at his work before deciding anything. When Hokuto makes a side comment, Akiha is on it again. This makes Mizuki ask if Akiha is Hokuto's boyfriend, but Hokuto firmly denies it, which completely destroys Akiha's good mood. Later, Mizuki begs Izumi to join her to see the exhibit, though Izumi tries to convince her that it is fine not to attend if she doesn't want to model to begin with. Mizuki thinks it would be impolite to turn Akiha down without at least taking a look at the gallery. However, Izumi firmly tells her to skip it. This makes Mizuki assume that he does not like Akiha. Izumi gets a little annoyed with her, so he decides to take a shower to cool off. As he does so, he can't help but feel like Mizuki is once again putting her identity at risk by being near Akiha. He reasons that he really needs to look after her to make sure she is safe. However, he calms down and realizes that isn't the case at all. The reason he always stays close to her is that he wants to, and because he wants Mizuki all to himself. He then wonders what Mizuki thinks about him now. The next day, Mizuki brings along not just Izumi, but Shuichi and Minami as well. The group is surprised to see so many people at the exhibit, and Minami even spots Wataru among the attendees. When they approach him, Wataru explains that he just wanted to gauge how good Akiha really is since his popularity is widespread. However, he thinks Akiha isn't all that talented. In favor of ignoring Wataru, they decide to look around some more, and Mizuki notices that the shots are mostly in black and white. She finds them all intriguing, but one picture, titled Goddess, catches her attention. Mizuki finds herself mesmerized by it, and Akiha sneaks up on her to get her opinion. After recovering from the shock, Mizuki admits that it is beautiful and learns that the model was actually Akiha's ex-wife. This confuses Mizuki because she thought that he likes men, but Akiha explains that he loves beautiful people regardless of gender. Minami decides to mention that Wataru seems to be a fan of his, but Akiha can easily tell that Wataru is the type of person who thinks he can become a photographer just by owning an expensive camera. The comment hurts Wataru personally. Seeing that all the boys are present, Akiha invites them to check out his studio. Once he has them in the room, he suggests that they let him take some test shots of them. Minami decides to allow it. When the group looks at him with stunned expressions, he tells them that they should be scared of having their pictures taken. He wants to see for himself how good Akiha really is so he can consider the modeling gig. Soon, the entire group finds themselves preparing for a simple shoot. However, based on all the preparation being done, Mizuki and Shuichi feel like this is turning into an actual shoot. After a while, Kotobuki, the makeup artist, arrives and apologizes for being late. She blames her tardiness on this being an out-of-the-blue job from Akiha. Since she sees Mizuki already by the makeup area, she decides to start with her first and introduces herself. Mizuki observes her and feels like she has seen Kotobuki before. Kotobuki is very friendly with her, even commenting on how nice Mizuki's skin is. When Kotobuki begins working on her, Mizuki finally recognizes her from the portrait photo outside and exclaims that she is the goddess. Kotobuki doesn't deny that she was the model, and Mizuki realizes that this also means Kotobuki is Akiha's ex-wife. Kotobuki mentions how surprised she is that Mizuki managed to tell that she was the model. A stylist teases that Kotobuki seemed more masculine back then and even mentions how Akiha has a talent for seeing the true essence of a model, regardless of their gender. Because of that explanation, Mizuki says that she now understands that the photo of Kotobuki is filled with love. Kotobuki gets embarrassed, and to hide it, she begins playfully hitting Mizuki on the back. When she announces that Mizuki is done, all her friends are surprised by how adorable Kotobuki made her look, especially Shuichi, who was flustered. However, the stylists point out that Mizuki is a male, which embarrasses Kotobuki, so she brings Mizuki back to the chair to redo her makeup. While Kotobuki works on her again, Mizuki can't help but wonder why Kotobuki and Akiha got divorced, since she finds Kotobuki a very pleasant person. Once they are all done, Akiha makes them pose for some group shots, which Mizuki feels comfortable with. However, after that is done, he wants to try some solo shots and decides to start with Mizuki. Mizuki manages to do the more serious ones, but when Mizuki is asked to smile, Akiha finds her too stiff and tries to get her to relax by pinching her cheeks. This makes Mizuki laugh and Izumi notices. Izumi observes her, and from the looks of it, Mizuki seems to have finally loosened up. She is clearly enjoying herself during the shoot, expressing her playful side in her set. When Mizuki is done, she is shocked when Izumi fixes her with a hard look before heading over to the shooting area without being told to. He even decides to get himself ready for the shoot. Akiha is happy that he is eager, but Izumi reasons that he is only doing this to speed the shoot up because he wants to head home. This seems to intrigue Akiha as he begins instructing Izumi on how to pose for him. Kotobuki can clearly see what's going on, so she approaches Mizuki and tells her that Akiha really looks like he is fond of Izumi. Suddenly, a model named Murray bursts into the room and complains that Akiha is not using her as the model she proposed. Minami recognizes her as a high-demand model who is pretty new to the scene. Akiha remains uninterested, mentioning that he already sent her a rejection letter last week. Mori insists that she is the perfect fit for the shoot. Shuichi finds her scary as she continues trying to convince Akiha that his chosen models are nothing but amateurs. Akiha remains firm with his decision and tells her that even if he is working with new models, they are more original than her. He finds Murray boring to work with because everything she does is only a copy of someone else. Unable to argue with him, Murray leaves the studio, still fuming over losing the project. The group realizes just how scary Akiha can be when he is interrupted. The shoot continues and Akiha gives them a lot of solo shots, making sure to bring out everyone's unique personalities. When he feels satisfied with their individual shots, he brings them together again for a few more group photos since everyone seems comfortable in front of the camera at this point. Once he gets the shots he wants, he finally ends the shoot. Later, while reviewing the developed photos, Akiha notices how Mizuki tends to stand out from the others. Something about her catches his interest, and it makes him want to learn more about her. Back at the dorm, Mizuki ends up thinking about Izumi too much while she is taking a bath, and she shocks herself. However, even when she tries to think about other things, she really can't get over how handsome Izumi was during the shoot. She finishes her bath and secretly feels happy about the whole experience. She hops out of their shared bathroom so he can take his turn. She takes her time observing him and realizes that love can be greedy. She thinks about the different physical traits she loves about him, but she gets distracted when Izumi ruffles her hair because she didn't dry it again. He scolds her about her carelessness. When he tells her to be in bed by the time he is done showering, Mizuki can't help but think about how kind Izumi can be. When he disappears into the bathroom, she allows herself to feel a little giddy over how much love she feels for him. By the time Izumi is done with his bath, he finds Mizuki already sleeping near his bed. He tries to wake her so she can climb to the top bunk and sleep properly, but Mizuki ends up pulling Izumi down onto his bed while she nestles on top of him. Once she is comfortable enough, she drifts back to sleep. Izumi decides to give in and let her sleep on top of him since Mizuki is almost impossible to wake up. He reviews the day and admits to himself that he got jealous earlier during the shoot when Mizuki was smiling at Akiha. He assumed he had a good grasp of his feelings, but was caught off guard earlier. He thinks about how possessive he has gotten over Mizuki, and it makes him feel pathetic because he has no confirmation of how she feels about him. Just as he begins to feel comfortable in their position, he feels Mizuki stir above him, so he assumes she is having a weird dream. However, Mizuki ends up snuggling too close, and it starts becoming too much for him to handle. He manages to pry Mizuki off of him, but she only clutches his sheets while happily mumbling his name. Izumi looks at her and decides it is too dangerous for them to be sleeping so close to each other, so he opts to sleep on the floor instead. Mizuki remains unaware of the situation until she wakes up in the morning. The next day, Mizuki tries to get Izumi to forgive her. She tells Shuichi that Izumi is mad at her for taking his bed last night. When Izumi continues to ignore her, she becomes upset and starts crying, which angers Shuichi. He tries to get Izumi to pay attention to Mizuki, though Izumi tries to block off their requests. Later, Mizuki ends up telling Hokuto about what happened the previous night. Hokuto feels more sorry for Izumi than for her and understands why Izumi did what he had to do in that situation. But to put Mizuki at ease, he tells her that it's normal for boys to sleep on the floor, so Izumi will probably forgive her sometime soon. Mizuki then notices that Akiha isn't around, and Hokuto begins telling her that he would prefer it if Akiha wasn't in his clinic every day. He feels irritated when Akiha suddenly arrives out of nowhere and hugs him. He then hands Mizuki the test shots, and Mizuki promises to show them to Izumi and the other boys in the courtyard. Akiha promises to catch up to her as she leaves to show the others. Hokuto feels suspicious about Akiha's motives and tries to get him to share what he is planning for Mizuki. However, Akiha turns the suspicion around, mentioning that Hokuto is oddly distracted by Mizuki. To prove his point, he even catches Hokuto off guard by planting a kiss on his lips. Akira decides to take his leave, telling Hokuto not to worry about Mizuki because he's only interested in her and isn't really planning anything. When Akira leaves the infirmary, Hokuto begins to worry about what kind of trouble Mizuki has gotten herself into. At the courtyard, Mizuki and the group decide to open the test shots. They are immediately amazed by the level of skill Akira demonstrated in a test shoot, as the photos make them all look like actual models. Shuichi in particular is in love with Mizuki's photos. Mizuki tries to draw attention away from herself in favor of the group looking at Izumi's photos instead. However, she begins feeling embarrassed when she studies them. Before Mizuki can say anything, Shuichi and Minami are the ones who tell Izumi that he looks handsome in his shots. This makes Izumi question what his life has come to, so he begins trudging his way to practice instead. He sees Akira right before leaving the courtyard, and Akira hands him some extra photos before joining the rest of the group. Since Izumi finds the whole thing suspicious, he decides to look at the photos he was handed. To his surprise, Mizuki is obviously a girl in them. He gets shocked and looks behind him to see Akira smiling over at him from his spot. The boys end up talking about the shoot. Taking this as a good sign, Akira asks if they are ready to give him an answer about the modeling gig. However, Minami admits that they cannot give him an answer without Izumi's input first. Akira decides that it is a valid answer and takes his leave, but reminds the group to contact him. Later, at the bookstore, Mizuki considers buying one of Akira's photo books, but has trouble deciding because of the price. However, she ultimately decides to get it and spots Kotobuki at the counter next to her. They decide to talk at a cafe, and Kotobuki takes the opportunity to apologize to Mizuki for putting feminine makeup on her during the test shoot. Mizuki notices that Kotobuki and Akira share a similar sweet tooth based on Kotobuki's overly sugary order. Mizuki decides to tell Kotobuki that she really loved the photo where Kotobuki modeled, which is why she chose to buy the book. She then decides to ask Kotobuki about her marriage with Akira. Kotobuki admits that she really was married to Akira, and that her feelings for him never really changed. According to Kotobuki, Akira was the first man to treat her like an actual person. Back then, Kotobuki never really liked being treated like a girl because it felt like she was being placed into a box. Mizuki has a feeling that she understands what Kotobuki is talking about, and Kotobuki admits that she never liked being perceived only by her outer appearance. However, Kotobuki also admits that she feels like she was never really enough for Akira, and mentions that she was unable to fill the gap in his heart. She explains that there was no real animosity behind their divorce. It was simply something they decided on because their hearts were no longer aligned. Seeing Mizuki give her a sorrowful look, Kotobuki tells her that she does not need to worry about them because they are more like siblings now. She reassures Mizuki that they still love each other as friends and that is okay with them. Back at the dorm, Izumi studies the photos Akira gave him in private. Based on the shots, he can tell that Akira has already discovered that Mizuki is a girl. Since Akira gave the photos to him specifically, it also means that Akira already knows Izumi is aware of the secret as well. He studies one of the candid shots and wonders if that is how he really looks around Mizuki. When he hears Mizuki arrive, he quickly hides the photos. Mizuki tells him how she met Kotobuki and had tea with her, even mentioning that Kotobuki is Akira's ex-wife. Mizuki then goes up to Izumi and shows him that she purchased Akira's photo collection, specifically the one featuring Kotobuki. She is about to show him some of the photos, but Kotobuki is rather revealing in them, so Mizuki decides to slam the book shut and slide away from him. Izumi does not see the big deal and mentions that they saw plenty of Kotobuki's shots during the exhibit, so it should not matter if he sees them again. However, Mizuki still refuses to hand him the book, reasoning that it feels different now. She knows Izumi has a point and that it is normal for a healthy boy his age to be interested. However, she feels uncomfortable with the thought of Izumi looking at Kotobuki, so she suddenly makes an excuse about needing to go for a walk. She decides to voice her frustrations to Yujiro outside. The next day, Amazo appears before the group in the lunch hall with this full dramatic flair. Apparently, Amazo wanted to confront them about their photo shoot with Akira because he heard the information from Wataru. Since some of the students seem to be at a loss over who Akira is, Mazo decides to be the one to enlighten them. He tells the others that Akira is a renowned photographer who has won several top prizes and received plenty of recognition. However, no matter how highly he talks about Akira, it does not seem to particularly impress anyone in the lunch hall. Since no one seems to be listening to him, he demands to know why someone like Akira is interested in Minami and the others. Shuichi tells Maso that Akira had asked them to model for him. The information initially causes Maso to fume, but since he cannot do anything about it, he decides to wallow in despair. However, once he recovers, he tells the group that he will cheer for their success and even breaks a glass to prove his point. He immediately runs out of the lunch hall, and the group can tell that Mazo is really just jealous because he was not asked to model. The group realizes that they need to make a decision soon, but before they can discuss anything further, the other students get excited, surround them, and begin asking all sorts of questions. By the time Mizuki tells Hokuto about it, the version of the story he heard from other people is that Mizuki and the others will be going to Paris to become big celebrities. He advises Mizuki to just let the rumors cool down on their own. He then asks what she plans to do about the modeling gig. Mizuki admits that she isn't sure about it and wonders if something happened between Hokuto and Akiha because he seems so antagonistic toward him. Though Hokuto denies it, he worries specifically about Mizuki getting mixed up with Akiha. There is something about the way Mizuki managed to captivate Akiha that bothers him. Later, Minami meets up with Mizuki, Shuichi, and Izumi because they need to come up with a decision about Akiha's proposal. Shuichi and Minami mention wanting to accept it since they don't see much harm in a one-time project. However, Izumi decides not to take it, mentioning that he wants to focus fully on his high jumps. Mizuki seems hesitant to give them her answer, which annoys Izumi for some reason. He decides to leave the group and head to training rather than listen to what Mizuki has to say. Since she is bothered by the way he left, Mizuki decides to go after him. Once she catches up to him, she asks why he is so against her modeling for Akiha. Izumi is about to tell her, but Akiha suddenly appears and tells Mizuki that Izumi is only worried about her because he believes Akiha is a bad man who is about to steal her away. He walks up to Mizuki and tells her that he came over to clear up a misunderstanding. Without any warning, he suddenly lifts Mizuki over his shoulder and tells Izumi that he'll be taking Mizuki for a drive, so if he'd like to borrow her from him for a while. Without giving Izumi a chance to answer, he begins carrying Mizuki away toward the parking lot. He shows Mizuki his ride and encourages her to get in. Once inside, Mizuki realizes that it's too small a car for someone as tall as Akiha. Mizuki is a little nervous because she remembers that Akiha likes people regardless of gender, so that means she might not be completely safe around him. Akiha brings Mizuki to a riverside and admits that he often comes here to watch people. He brings up the modeling gig he was offering, and Mizuki tells him that Minami and Shuichi had already said they were interested. However, Izumi mentioned that he was busy with practice. Mizuki admits that she thinks modeling for Akiha would be fun, but she isn't sure she's really cut out to be a model. Akiha asks if Mizuki likes his photos, and when Mizuki confirms that she does, Akiha mentions that she can definitely become his model. He tells her that photographers and models give each other signals. To prove his point, he tells Mizuki to observe the girl nearby who is looking at her phone. Akiha mentions that the most important thing about photos is love. He explains that if both the model and the photographer have affection for each other, it's only natural for those emotions to be captured on camera. He mentions how easy it is to make marketable photos with just a pretty model and a decent photographer, but those photos hardly carry any love in them. According to Akiha, Mizuki liking his photographs is the only sign he needs to know that they are compatible working together. At practice, Izumi keeps messing up his jumps to the point that the coach is already scolding him. Izumi is frustrated, aware that his form is poor because his mind is elsewhere. He knows that Mizuki is the one occupying his thoughts. While he is worried about Akiha knowing that Mizuki is a girl, he is also aware that he is frustrated over other things as well. He can hardly name his emotions anymore, and even his coach thinks that he's pushing himself too hard. Back with Mizuki, she is brought to a viewing deck with the sight of the city in front of her. Since it's sunset, she can see the lights slowly coming on in the buildings ahead. She remembers that Izumi once brought her to a place with a similar view. Akiha catches her mind wandering, and she explains that she has a friend who likes watching the city come alive before it gets dark because it makes him think about going home. Akiha mentions having a similar feeling and tells Mizuki that his mother had left his father and him. He tells her that they never saw it coming because they just assumed she went out to do some shopping. One time, when he was 10, he managed to find her new address and went to visit her. However, upon realizing it was him, his own mother shut the door on him and even yelled at the other occupants that she never knew him. He remembers how the city had begun to light up and the emotions he felt at that time. He begins mentioning how miserable he feels, and that sets Mizuki off. She headbutts him and tells him that he shouldn't feel miserable. Instead, he should be happier than his mother because he is in a better position now. The shock of the hit takes Akiha back, but then he laughs at Mizuki's response. He admits that he is surprised because most girls just cry or sympathize with him when he talks about the story. Mizuki is the second person who hit him after hearing it. He admits that the first one was actually Kotobuki, and she had told him that he should just continue living on the edge and having a great time. During the drive home, Mizuki recalls how Kotobuki mentioned that Akiha has a hole in his heart. When Akiha drops Mizuki off at the dorm, he hands her an envelope. Mizuki enters her room, surprised that Izumi is still awake. Izumi doesn't respond to her and simply announces that he'll head to bed before pulling the covers over himself. Mizuki opens the envelope and sees that it's a photo of herself and Izumi. She notices how happy she looks and feels grateful that this wasn't included in the set they saw earlier. Otherwise, it would be obvious that she is in love with Izumi. She recalls what Akiha had told her and seriously considers modeling for him after all. One evening, Mizuki tells Izumi the reason she wants to try modeling for Akiha. Izumi knows there's nothing he can do because Mizuki has already made up her mind, so he decides to join her for the modeling gig. He reasons that he'll still have time to do his training and the job anyway. He doesn't tell Mizuki that he can't focus on his high jumps because of the anxiety he feels whenever he thinks about being separated from her. Mizuki is extremely happy that she can take more photos with Izumi, and her smile makes Izumi think she looks really cute. On the day of the shoot, the group arrives together at the studio. They are surprised when they smell something sickeningly sweet in the air to the point that it even causes Izumi to pass out. Kotobuki greets them. She explains that Akiha is currently cooking breakfast in the kitchen. Akiha emerges from the kitchen and sees the group. Since it's early, he invites them to join him for breakfast, which turns out to be just red bean paste. He eats some straight from the pot to emphasize how good it is, but the group feels sick at the idea of eating something so sweet. Later, Mizuki is in her changing room and notices that her clothes seem to be something a girl would wear. She recalls how Akiha did hint that he knew she was actually female, but she wonders if it was just a mistake because she can't remember a time when she slipped up in front of him. When she hears people calling for her again, she decides to quickly get ready. Once everyone is dressed, the shoot happens right away. They start off with some group shots and everyone is able to follow Akiha's instructions really well. Later, he tells them that he'll be taking shots of them in pairs. Shuichi sees an opportunity and volunteers himself and Mizuki as the first pair. When Akiha agrees to start with them, Shuichi celebrates because this means he gets a special moment with just Mizuki. During their shoot, everyone finds them adorable because to them, Shuichi and Mizuki look like very close siblings. Izumi watches from a corner, and when he notices that Shuichi is holding Mizuki closely, he chucks his shoe at him. When Shuichi gets mad, Izumi explains that he was aiming for a fly, which causes Akiha to chuckle. Akiha tells them they'll switch up the pairs now, but he needs to change a film first. His assistant notices that Mizuki seems interested in the film, so he tells her that Akiha insists on working with film for the shoot. When the camera is ready, Akiha directs Minami and Izumi on how to pose. Mizuki and Shuichi find it strange since the poses seem like he's coupling them up. Izumi seems to catch on and asks Akiha to explain the odd posing instructions. Akiha simply explains that both of them are extremely handsome and he wants to draw that out. Mizuki finds herself admiring Akiha. She thinks about how, during her turn, Akiha managed to draw out all sorts of expressions from her. After Izumi and Minami finish, Akiha allows everyone to take a break. Izumi decides to take a seat next to Mizuki and complains about all of Akiha's odd demands. However, Mizuki insists that he looked really cool during the shoot. Even Minami agrees and says that he's enjoying himself. He explains that he feels himself change every time he hears the shutter go off, which is something he has only experienced with Akiha. Because of that, he believes that Akiha really does have a talent for bringing out the best in his models. One of the staff notices that they have run out of tea, so Mizuki and Shuichi volunteer to head out and buy some more. In the hall by the vending machines, once they get the drinks, they notice Mari coming out of a studio. They recognize her as the girl that Akiha told off the other day. Mari feels insulted by the description and marches toward them, telling both of them not to get too full of themselves. She tells them that they have some nerve as amateurs for stealing gigs from professional models. Mizuki and Shuichi are shocked by the accusations, and Shuichi tells Mari to bring her issues up with Akiha himself. However, Mari decides to walk away, telling them that she will never forgive them. At school, Mizuki's thoughts linger on how hateful Mari was toward them. She's a little worried because it does seem like they stole the opportunity from Mari. Shuichi catches her lost in thought and decides to try cheering her up by mentioning that they get to see the shots today. Mizuki instantly lights up at the thought of seeing Izumi's photos. Her heartwarming expression makes Shuichi curious about what she might be thinking about. Suddenly, Izumi appears by the doorway and asks Shuichi if he is done lobbing the trash. Both Mizuki and Shuichi stare at him oddly, and he realizes that he slipped into his dialect. He explains that it is how they say throw out in Hokkaido. Shuichi finds it amusing and shares that in Kansai they often use the term dispose, which he believes is a cooler way of saying it. After school, the group heads over to Akiha's studio and finds everyone frantically looking for something. Kotobuki is the one who tells them that the film they used for the shoot is missing. One of the assistants returns and tells them that he found the film in the second floor trash can, but shows them that the film has been cut and crumpled up. All of them look at the film on the table and suddenly feel the loss of all the hard work they put into the shoot. Shuichi then gets an idea and whispers to Mizuki that he thinks Mari was the one who ruined the film. Mizuki stares sorrowfully at the film and has a hard time believing that Mari would go that far. Akiha tells them that there isn't anything they can do except go all out on a reshoot. He instructs everyone to get ready, and they all show him that they've already made preparations. The stylists then go to the group and tell them that they need them again, and Akiha reveals that for this shoot, they'll be going to a different location. In the dressing room, Mizuki finishes getting ready and decides to help Kotobuki with her things. Heading to the car, Mizuki points out that she noticed Akiha doesn't have a very big staff. Kotobuki explains that Akiha is very particular about who he works with. As they head toward the stairs, Mari spots Mizuki. As she passes her, she tells Mizuki that it must be very tiring to have to do a reshoot. Mizuki is surprised because Mari just hinted that she was responsible for the film getting destroyed. She tries to get Mari to answer her. Kotobuki heads back up to check on Mizuki and finds it odd that Mari is on their floor. She then realizes what's going on and scolds Mari for being unprofessional. She tells Mari that if she really wants to get projects, then she needs to compete by using her work instead of sabotaging others. She promises not to reveal that Mari is the one who ruined the photos, on the condition that Mari will never do something this disgraceful again. Suddenly, Mizuki has the urge to interject that she will beat Mari, and that her photos will turn out so well that Mari will have to admit defeat. Kotobuki feels proud and compliments Mizuki for standing up for herself. On the car ride to the location, Akihata explains that the concept for the shoot is actually growing wings. Akihata tells them not to worry about any of the finer details and to trust him and his team for instructions. All they need to do is boldly show themselves to him. Minami mentions that he finds it amazing how Akihata managed to bounce back after the fiasco. Akihata laughs breezily and mentions that he can because he is a genius. Arriving at the location, the group is greeted by the busy life of the city during the hour. Akihata quickly guides them and starts shooting his shots. People quickly catch on that a shoot is happening right in the streets, and many try to get a glimpse of it. They have drawn a large crowd as they pose for Akihata. Everyone is amazed by them since they are all fresh faces. Most of the people they attract are girls who are interested in learning more about them. They end up shooting well into the evening. Eventually, Izumi gets a little annoyed that all of them are being kept out so late, so he brings the matter up to Akihata. Akihata promises that he just needs one more set and then he will be satisfied. Akihata then admits to Izumi that he actually used Mizuki to get Izumi to model for him, but reassures him that he genuinely wanted to shoot her as well. When he notices that Izumi is giving him a surprised look, he reassures Izumi that he can keep a secret. After a few days, the photos are plastered all over town. They quickly become the talk of the town, and Izumi and Mizuki even overhear some girls talking about them. At school, Mizuki shows one of the posters to Hokuto, who is surprised that there is no army of girls waiting for them outside. Mizuki mentions that Akihata and his team made sure none of their personal information got out. She tells him that Akihata is going abroad for a lengthy shoot, but it seems that Hokuto is already aware of Akihata's latest project. Hokuto is unwilling to tell Mizuki the details, which makes her wonder if something happened between them. She decides to take her leave because the school will be having an assembly. When she leaves, Hokuto realizes that the assembly is for a special event. At the gymnasium, Izminami reveals that they will be getting ready for a Christmas ball with St. Blossom Academy, which only happens once every 3 years. Minami understands that many of them do not know about the ball, so he explains that Osaka High and St. Blossom Academy have a good relationship with each other. The joint Christmas ball is a long-standing tradition that started over 40 years ago. Minami promises the boys that before the ball happens, all of them will master the waltz, and that the event date is on December 23. Megumi passionately exclaims that all gym classes will be dedicated to them learning the waltz and that they cannot afford to embarrass themselves in front of the girls. Since the boys do not seem to be interested, Maso explains that the waltz is an intimate dance between a man and a woman. The idea of dancing with girls gets the crowd excited, and Minami tells them to treat the event like a school-sanctioned mixer. At the end of school, as they head back to the dorms, Shinji and Kyogo talk about how great the girls at St. Blossom Academy are. Mizuki thinks the ball is a great opportunity to make some good high school memories. Sari mentions how sad he finds it that he did not enroll at St. Blossom Academy to get a chance to dance with Minami. Shuichi calls him an idiot, reminding him that he is a guy, but Sari argues that he is cute enough to pass as a girl and could easily trick everyone. When Shuichi scolds him for being a creep, Mizuki feels attacked because she is basically tricking everyone about her gender. Mizuki then realizes that this means she will also have to dance with some girls. She looks at Izumi's back as he walks ahead and thinks that she would have liked the chance to dance with him instead. One morning, Hokuto wakes up and starts his usual morning routine by drinking his morning coffee for breakfast. Once he is fully woken up, he gets ready and leaves his home. He takes the train to get to school and start his work. However, despite everything, he is still very diligent once he is on the clock. Akihata opens the clinic's door and approaches him slowly because Hokuto is taking a nap. But Hokuto wakes up, catches him trying to take a photo, and kicks him in the face. Despite getting hurt, Akihata still loves Hokuto. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to see what happens next.